Debbie Osborne. Welcome to the micro session on mandated reporting of child abuse. I'm a lawyer at Taylor English and I defend camps, and many of you have talked to me over the years, and I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but I'm glad that we're able to do this presentation. As we go into looking at mandated reporting of child abuse, I'll walk you through some of the things that we have that we need to look at. And if you have any questions, be sure to take down my number and feel free to call me with any questions or any situations that come up. One good resource that I always send people to is childwelfare.gov. It is a one-stop shop. They have lists of your state, of what the requirements are there, and usually links to your Child Protective Services agency. You also can go to wherever your Child Protective Services agency is. They usually will have a page that talks about the mandated reporting laws and how they enforce it and what they expect. First question to look at is, who is a mandated reporter? If you're in a camping program, your employees are mandated reporters. Every state that I know of includes groups such as yours in mandated reporting. Even if the statute doesn't require it, best practices are going to require it these days. The same for volunteers. There is a movement in most states to add volunteers to the list of required reporters. Again, even if your state doesn't have that, best practices encourage it, so you need to make sure that you train your volunteers along with your staff. Why do we need to report suspicions of abuse? The main reason is to protect the children in our care, and if they're being abused, to get them out of it. A second reason, which is not as important but still important, is criminal liability. Almost every state backs up its requirement of mandated reporting with a criminal penalty. Some states have it as felonies, most states have it as a misdemeanor. Even in those states that have it as a misdemeanor, however, a conviction will get you on the child abuse registry, which will disqualify you or your staff, whoever is on it, from ever working in a youth serving organization again. So there's a pretty big penalty, personal penalty there that you need to pay attention to. And finally, there is civil liability for your organization. I've defended cases where the claim was that if the staff had paid attention to the signals of abuse and had reported it, then the subsequent abuse would not have happened. So you always want to avoid any sort of lawsuit, even if you win. Going through a lawsuit is devastating to your organization. So these are all very good reasons and very important reasons that you want to pay attention to your mandated reporting responsibilities. The next question is where you report. Some states require the staff members to report directly, and some states allow the staff to report up the chain of command to a designated person. My recommendation, to the extent that your state law allows it, is that first you have a person in the administration who's designated to deal with these reports. And then secondly, that you require your staff to go to that person, and then the staff member and the administrator then make the call together to Child Protective Services. The reason for that is that then Child Protective Services is getting the unfiltered version from the staff member, but you all at the same time are knowing what's going on in your organization. You know what was said. And then a final reason is so that if there is some historic pattern that was not specific enough at the time to mandate a report, your staff member may not know it, but you will be able to recognize that pattern, or your administrator will be able to recognize the pattern and pass on that historic information. The next question is, most states require a report either by the organization or by the staff member to Child Protective Services. Some states require a report to law enforcement. That's an older model. Most states are gradually moving responsibility to Child Protective Services. What to report? Every state has a mandated reporter law, and they all require reports of physical abuse, physical neglect, sexual abuse, and sexual exploitation. I'll pause here for a moment to talk about a common problem that most people don't recognize is that many states' sexual exploitation laws include sexting, where a child sends a picture of themselves to someone else, or a child gets a picture and then forwards it to a group of friends. We don't think of that as your classic sexual exploitation, but state laws are broad enough to include that. Some states are beginning to recognize that children make mistakes and don't always need to be in the criminal justice system, but not every state is recognizing that. So you need to know what your state requires, and no matter what you think about it, you need to know whether or not to make a report if you see that sort of thing. The emotional abuse is another thing that many states are requiring. There's a movement to add that, so more and more states are adding that to their list. And then witnessing domestic violence is another one. Some states have it, other states are moving in that direction. Even if the child's not a direct victim of the domestic violence, the fact that they are present in the room when their parents beat each other up is becoming a recognized problem. When to report is always an important question. Most states have a time limit. The most common time limit I've seen is 24 hours. Some states, such as Florida, have a requirement that you report it immediately. And that time limit starts running usually, excuse me, in most states where there is a reasonable suspicion of abuse. Some states have a lower standard, just any suspicion of abuse. Again, look and see what your state has, but these are the sort of things that you need to know when you're looking at your state statute. When that statute starts and when you have reasonable suspicion is what I tend to call red flags of abuse or pink flags. Now, the red flags are things that are very obvious: physical signs of abuse, disclosure from a child, or report from another child. Somebody says, Camper Jenny is having an affair with staff member John. Anytime you get those sort of reports, those sort of disclosures, you need to report it. You do not stop to consider whether or not what you're getting is a credible report. I don't care if Jenny or Jenny's friend have lied to you 3 times a day since you have known them. You need to make that report. The penalties are too severe if you don't. So do not pass go, do not collect $200, do not have any independent opinions, just make the report. Pink flags, on the other hand, are when you see things a child may not tell you straight out. You'll get hints, you'll get hesitation, they'll start backtracking. You see different signs of things that make you wonder, but it's not very clear. These are all indications that you need to look for patterns. So, for example, the first time a child walks into a door is very different than the third or fourth time that you see bruises from walking into a door. And then the next thing is you need to ask more questions. You will hear from law enforcement and from me that you do not need to investigate this. But sometimes you need to ask enough questions to know whether or not you need to report something. So you do need to approach the child. Again, this is within your training and your expertise with how to work with kids and how to talk to them and how to have relationships. So you need to just ask questions and find out what's going on. The reason for that is some of these pink flags that I talk about, these signs of abuse, I could go through a lot of them, but basically what you're looking for is signs of stress. And those are what we call non-specific indicators. Kids can be under stress because they're being abused. They also can be under stress because their parents are having a divorce or because their grandmother is in the hospital with COVID. There's no way to know from the signs themselves what's causing the stress. You have to approach the child and ask questions. And again, it's the sort of thing that you would do anyway as a good camp, is trying to figure out where your child is coming from and how you can help them and what they need in order for you to address their needs. The other sign that you sometimes get is non-specific physical symptoms. If a child has a stomachache that nobody can find a physical explanation for, usually that's some sort of emotional stress that is happening, and some sort of emotional stress that you need to figure out what it is and if you can help. It may be reportable, or it may just be something that you need to deal with within your program. So that's the highlights. There's a whole lot more. If you have any questions, this is my contact information. Feel free to give us a call, and we will be glad to help you. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful camping season.